Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of Greet the Week. I am Mona Duncan, and I'm joined, of course, by my co-host, Jan Moray, and we have some guests joining us today, and we thank you very much for being here, and also those of you that will join us later by looking at us after we've posted it on various places. Anyway, it is a delight to be here today, and today's topic is on laughter. And Jan, what were you meaning about when you were talking about laughter?
Well, I was thinking, going back to our roots here and how we got started on Mondays. You wanted to have a positive message for people to start their week off. And so I was thinking, well, what a better way to start the week than to talk about laughter and talking about looking at ourselves and being able to laugh at the silly things that we do. And I thought maybe we talk about that a little bit, because sometimes that's hard to do. I know I was always, and we have talked about perfection, being a perfectionist here on this this broadcast before, and I admitted that I'm one of those that likes everything to go just right. I don't like for anything not to go well. And so it's kind of hard to laugh at yourself when things don't go well. At least for me, I want to hide it, and I don't want to tell on myself. But that's something that I've learned from my husband. He is the world's best at laughing at himself, and he'll do something crazy, and he'll go and he'll tell everybody. And I said, "How come you told everyone about this?" For me, I would be hiding it. I wouldn't want to be admitting what I had done. And then I realized that it's a real gift to be able to see the humor in the things that you do, and to laugh about what's going on. And I've got a few examples that I want to share, not to give away too much about my personal life here, but I thought it would be something to get us started with talking about laughing about ourselves. So do you have anything else to add to that, Mona, before I...
Well, yes, it's always in laughter, you want to laugh at yourself, but with others.
Right, yeah.
We don't want to laugh at anyone else, but we want to laugh at ourselves and find something, that you can laugh. And one of my philosophies is, if you're going to laugh about it someday, go ahead and make that day today.
That's a good thing to think.
I mean, have you ever done anything and you were really embarrassed by it and all this kind of stuff, but then later, whenever the emotion is not there, it's a big hee-haw story?
Right.
And so if it's going to be someday, stop right there in the minute, and it goes back to being conscious and being aware, and always being, be right then, right there, stop and make a shift.
Yeah. And that's a way of dealing with your emotions too. I mean, because being embarrassed about something is a negative emotion, something we could be ashamed about. But those emotions do go away. I mean, when it's so fresh, it's hard to accept it and to deal with it. But learning how to deal with it in the moment when it happens, and I love what you said about make that moment now that you start laughing about it. And because that's healthier than to go and think about, oh, I'm so ashamed of what I did. I'm so stupid of what I did. And that creates a lot of stress within yourself. But if you can say, well, everyone makes mistakes. These kinds of things happen. And it's kind of, when you sit back and think about it, it really was pretty funny. So let me laugh about it now.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of humility to be able to do that.
It does.
And it's recognizing, first of all, to get to that state of humility, instead of being humiliated by it, is to recognize our humanness.
Yeah.
And that somewhere down the line, others can probably identify to a degree as well.
Yeah.
And so that humility of, not thinking so much of ourselves that we can't recognize our humanness.
Right.
Do you have some examples?
I do. I had to think long and hard of things that I had trouble at the time, but I did find a good one. This was long time ago, probably 35 years ago. I went.
You were just a baby.
I know. I went to the Cayman Islands, and I was sitting on the beach, trying to get my tan, and there were people parasailing, and I had never seen parasailing before. And I just said, oh, that looks so much fun. I really like to do that, but I was scared of heights. And so I thought, well, I don't know how I'm going to like being way up in the air, but I'm going to go try it. And so I got several other people to go do it with me. And they just give you a real brief description of how it's going to, what's going to happen. And for those of you who've never done parasailing, it's you're on the beach, and you're tied to a boat, and the boat takes off, and you start running with the boat, and you've got this big old sail, attached to you. You're in a harness, and this sail's attached to you. And as the boat starts moving, you lift up in the air, and then all of a sudden you're in the air behind the boat. So you're not skiing, you're sailing, soaring in the air. And they said, now sometimes when you lift up, it's going to drop you back down. So don't lift up your legs. Even if you're in the air, keep running with your legs. Well, I got on there and started on, and it lifted me up, and I didn't pay any attention to keeping my legs down. I lifted my legs up, and then it dropped me down. So here it was dragging me across the beach, and somebody got a picture of me doing that, getting dragged through the sand into the beach. And but then I went up, and it was a beautiful experience being up in the air. Of course, then landing was a whole different thing. I landed okay. I landed just fine. You land in the water, the boat slows down, you land in the water. Well, this other boat was coming across and crossed the line, and I got caught in the line. And so this other boat is pulling me, and I am getting dragged behind this boat. Of course, the operator of the boat are yelling at him, stop, stop, stop. And I mean, that's the scariest trip I'd ever had. So I was pretty embarrassed about this whole thing, my starting and my ending. Nobody else had that experience. And for the longest time, I wouldn't ever talk about it. And then we went to, because there was a group of about 15 of us that went together on this trip, and they had a party afterwards and showed the pictures, and they had the one picture of me dragging in the sand, and I was just mortified, that anybody actually caught that in a picture. But I don't have a copy of that picture. Otherwise, I would have shown it just to laugh at myself here. But it was pretty funny, getting dragged in the sand. Of course, the joyride at the end was not a lot of fun for me, but everything turned out okay. I started to swallow too much water, but I'm sure it was pretty funny to look at, and I didn't listen to what they had told me. But it was a long time before I could tell people that had happened to me.
And did you put a different spin on it whenever you started telling?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I did on that one. I'm sure there's other times when I did that, but that one, I mean, I admit it was my fault. I didn't listen. They gave me the instructions. They told me not to lift my feet, to keep them down. And I went up, and I was like, oh, I'm sailing. And then all of a sudden, boom, I was down. And there's nothing you can do when you're being dragged. You cannot get your feet under you to get back up. It just doesn't work out that way.
So were you injured?
I was not. No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, because you're in sand and in water, and I mean, it's not like being dragged on concrete.
Right.
No, I didn't get hurt at all. It's just my pride.
Right.
What beach was this, Jan?
This was in Grand Cayman. Yeah.
I knew someone that fell at going into a department store, and they fell and really, hurt their head, but didn't think anything about it, thought it was okay, got up and dusted himself off and all of that. And anyway, he nearly died, literally.
Oh, no.
The next morning, he was in a coma already.
Oh, wow. He had a concussion.
He finally, his wife found him and sent to the hospital and everything. And he thought that the only thing that was wounded was his pride.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we need to laugh about those things, or at least not let our pride take over to the point that we don't take care of self and self-care.
Right, right. To admit what happens, so doctors know how to treat you.
Right, and not be Superman that you don't seek help whenever there is something that, falling from an upright position to a concrete floor can really be hurtful.
Oh, yeah. And as we get older, it is, we're aware of that. And when we have those kinds of falls, it is kind of embarrassing to, to let people know that you fell. Of course, if you're getting bruises and stuff, it's kind of hard to hide it.
Right. And, come up with your own little story about going back to your childhood or something without being embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
It's at yourself, but with others. And I know in your little comment about what we were going to be talking about, you said, what do you find to be funny? And I've got to thinking about that. What is it that I find to be funny? And I remember one time I was working at a bank, and there was a glass partition between each one of the offices. It was kind of a big camaraderie thing, but there was enough partition there that whoever was talking to the banker had a little bit of privacy. And anyway, this one person was coming in, and when you're a customer for a long time, you get to know all the officers, and so he knew everyone there. And he came in and was waving at those over there, but the one that he was going to, he walked right into that glass partition.
Oh no!
And I mean, he knocked himself silly.
Oh no!
And I just burst into laughing. I could not help it. I did laugh, and I really had to work hard to subdue that laughter because I cared. I genuinely cared about the pain that he was inflicted and even his own embarrassment. But I find those kind of things funny. I don't like, well, I shouldn't say I don't like, but it's not a favorite of mine, the slapstick comedy or anything like that. But whenever someone does maybe drag their feet instead of running with their feet, I find it amusing.
I was amusing looking. being dragged across the water there. And I run into a glass door, those sliding glass doors. You can't tell if they're there. I have walked into one of those. I totally forgot about that. But yeah, that's another one that you think, oh, how stupid can I be just to run into that door? But yeah, it is to brush it off as long as you're not hurt and laugh about it, because those things happen. And I'm one that I don't pay attention to what's around me. I'm focused on what I'm doing, and I don't really pay attention to my surroundings. So as a result, I'm very accident prone. So my husband gets a big kick out of that because I'm always running into things and bumping up with stuff. And
it's interesting because I wonder how much of that came from early childhood. Like, I have a daughter who's now 50, but when she was 2, we had the first sliding glass door we'd ever had in the house, and it went out to a pool area. And she would see us out in the pool area, and of course the door was closed, so she couldn't get out there. She would run into that thing. I bet she ran into that thing 4 or 5 times before she finally knew that door was there.
Oh, wow.
And she wanted to get out there with us. She was like not quite 2 or something. She wanted to get out there where we were, and she couldn't, she just start running towards the door, and then wham. She cried every time, but it took her quite a few times before she actually recognized that there was going to be something there. It took her a while to learn that. And she's the kind of kid who doesn't think, and just is real impulsive anyway, and now all through her whole life, and has been accident prone and gets herself into things like that, and seems like she doesn't learn the first time. She has to do it the second time before she gets it. And, she's 50. She made it, but you wonder whether or not, did you ever have those experiences when you were little, or is that something that now that you're focused on things now as an adult, you do it?
I don't remember anything like that from when I was young. I really don't remember, but I am just very focused on what I'm doing, and I work a lot out in my yard, and it's pretty hilly and pretty rocky, and I'll stumble quite a bit. And so now that I'm getting a lot older, I'm thinking I really need to start paying attention, because one of these days I'm going to fall and I'm going to really get hurt. And so it's something I'm just starting to be aware of now, that I need to pay more attention. But I don't know, maybe I was a kid, but I would very often find a bruise. I had no clue how I got it. So it's possible I stumbled into things. It was just so common for me. I never really paid attention.
Can I ask a question
Sure, Jared.
about laughter, about humor?
Sure.
What would Glasser say about the relationship between humor and logical thinking?
I don't know, but I do have a little example of Dr. Glasser laughing at someone.
Do you?
In a role play. If any of you have ever seen it, the one with Edna, who was portraying a client who is a major hypochondriac. And she was giving all these excuses and talking about how sick she was and woozy and all this kind of stuff, and how the doctors were tired of her, and that one day she was in the doctor's office and they called people that was numbered before her and people that was numbered after her. And she said, I think they're just, and he says, well, they're getting tired of you. And she said, yeah, apparently they are. And was talking back and forth. And she said, I have all these pains. And I had one doctor tell me one time, he said, I think the only thing that's right about you is the only thing that works about you and is right is your mouth. She said, and you're not going to believe this, but the very next day I had a jaw ache. And so Dr. Glasser laughed, and everyone in the audience watching that. And she got real offended, and she said, well, so even you think it's funny. And I loved his comeback to it, because he leaned into her and he said, I did find that funny. I did find it amusing, but I'm not laughing at you. And anyway, I thought that was just such a good comeback. Get honest, whatever it is. If you do laugh at someone running into a door, I don't remember what I said to that man, but I did have compassion for him, even though I could not help but laugh. That, just let them know I'm really not laughing at you, but it did strike me as funny. I did find it amusing. And
that is kind of embarrassing when you find yourself laughing at somebody because of something embarrassing, but it was funny what they did. And I think that's great to use and to respond honestly to them and said, yes, I did find it funny. I'm really not laughing at you. It's just the situation. Are you hurt? Are you okay?
Right.
Well, I've heard Glasser explain about why we laugh at punchlines and jokes, and why we laugh at certain things. And he says it's because when the comedians or the jokester, whoever is telling the joke, he's got your train of thought moving in one direction, and that seems to be logical. And then all of a sudden he switches it with the punchline or something you don't expect, and you find it funny because all of a sudden you recognize that you were not even on that same train of thought, but that's so logical for that to have happened. So one of Glasser's favorite jokes was Schroeder and Lucy in Peanuts cartoon, and Schroeder's walking out of the classroom and Lucy, and Schroeder says, how come you always get such good grades on the tests and I always get such bad ones, and we've studied together? And Lucy turns and looks at him and she says, it's because I remember the information until 1 minute after the test. You only remember it till 1 minute before. So it's we get our minds going in a certain direction, and it makes sense when the punchline comes out, but it seems funny because all of a sudden we recognize in our own mind that we were on a whole different train of thought, and so it becomes it creates that laughter in us.
And then too, sometimes we find things amusing if we don't laugh out loud, but we find it amusing if it's something that we identify with, such as everyone, good old Archie Bunker, and everyone has someone in their life that is a bigot or a prejudice that comes out with these off the wall things, and it is not humorous to meathead that was listening to it in the encounter that it is to those watching it, because we identify with, and we can see it when we're not emotionally involved in something. We can see more humor to it than whenever we're there. And so
would you say that all humor is a distortion of a logical reality? And that's what makes it funny. If it weren't a distortion of reality or logic, it wouldn't be funny. But it is a distortion. I'm using the word distortion. Maybe that's not the right word, but a difference between reality, a real logical expectation. All humor depends upon that. Is that correct?
Well, that's kind of what Nancy said about something different that you weren't expecting, that was so kind of a shock to her.
One side or the other seems to be illogical. So you're either on a train of thought that you think is logical, and then the comedian or whatever switches it totally, and now you go, oh my gosh, that's logical too. How come I didn't get that? So it's that metacognitive thinking, that when you laugh at something, it's like you're laughing really more at yourself than you are at the other person, because you're laughing at the fact that you didn't see this coming. It's sort of like America's Funniest Home Videos, and people used to love those things. And I had a very hard time watching them, because it seemed like people were getting hurt all the time.
A lot of those they are.
And they weren't funny to me. And yet you'd see it, and you knew, because it was on America's Home Videos or Funniest Videos, that somebody was going to make some kind of a stupid mistake or do something that they should have expected to get into a bad predicament. And yet there they go right after it and do it. And so it did seem funny sometimes, and yet I didn't like them very much, because I was afraid people were getting hurt to take those videos and put those online. I don't know whether that was, did they set it up and do it on purpose, or were they really, and did they get hurt? So.
But some mistakes are funny and some aren't.
That's right.
Is the difference that somebody gets hurt, and so it's not funny? If they don't get hurt, it is
Well,
funny?
It depends on who's hurt. I mean, I think some people don't mind laughing at when someone gets hurt. But to me, I don't like that. I don't want to be that kind of person. So to me, I cringe when I see it happen. I might laugh a little bit, because it is funny at the moment, because you kind of see it coming, and they step right into that situation anyway, and so you kind of laugh a little bit. But if somebody does get hurt, I cringe. I don't like that. So it's an afterthought maybe, but.
Are you familiar with the work of Dr. Howard Gardner, Multiple Intelligences?
Yeah.
Are other people, Jan?
No, I'm not, no.
No. Well, never mind then.
Well, a lot of times I will ask in a group, especially a class that I'm teaching or something, I'll ask people to share with one another a funny story to kind of, communicate and to get to know each other. And there was one time, was at a meeting, and this girl was sharing the time that had become something really funny with their family. And that she was a new Baylor graduate and was meeting someone really important, and her dad was going to be there and take them all to lunch and all this kind of stuff. And anyway, there was a whole a bunch of errors before they finally all got together. And the dad was super embarrassed, because the daughter had been the one that had, was responsible for all the errors that had taken place for them to finally get there. But eventually the gathering together with this important professor and having the meal together turned out to be wonderful. And she was talking about the fact that was one of her dad's biggest jokes to tell people, big ha-ha things, And anyway, even as she was telling the story as a funny outlet of I did this and I did that and I did something else, I sensed within her a pain, that her discomfort, that her errors had really, that had become a big hee-haw was pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes, humor, as we can begin to laugh at it, it can begin to help us to find some humor in our foibles. And to realize, it kind of goes back to one of the basic needs that we have. We do have that need for fun. And apparently part of that fun is the need to just laugh, to see things absurdly. I know I don't think it's a cartoon anymore, but it was The Far Side. And he would always have things that was just so. And one that I really loved was the Inconvenience Store, where everything was so high nobody could reach them. And it's those oddities that come across as being funny.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to, the way you look at things. Like with my incident with falling and being dragged across the sand. It's embarrassing. You're to be on the ground, you're getting sand in your mouth and stuff. And especially when I prided myself at being able to do so many things right. And I wanted to look good in whatever I did, be able to be competent in whatever I did. That was painful. And for a while I wouldn't talk about it because it was painful. But it's, when you come to the realization that, hey, nobody really cared as much about it as except for me. Nobody thought ill of me because I did that. It was funny and they laughed, and it's a bit hurtful that they laughed, but it's like, but it is funny. Nobody's going to hold that against me. Nobody's going to come back, years later and say how stupid I was because of what happened. You can look at it. Well, I gave everybody some humor for the day, and especially if nothing bad happens. When something bad happens as a result of it, it's a whole different story. But
I think you're right, Mona. Learning to laugh at our own fallibles or our own self is a good way to meet that need for love and for fun. When we are laughing at others, and especially if someone is getting hurt, even though people would say, well, that's fun for you, but to me, that's not a way to meet needs to satisfy needs for fun.
Mm-hmm.
But when we can learn to laugh at ourselves.
On the funniest home videos where, they capture someone falling down and it's just that little clip and they'll have this whole bunch of them together. I do find them entertaining and laughable. At the same time, my heart does go out to the people because there was a hurt there. Mm-hmm. But just living, life is much more fun the more laughter that we have in it, whether it is a hee-haw type laugh or whether it is just something that is amusing. And it certainly adds to our life. And so even if we do find someone walking into a glass partition somewhat amusing, that doesn't mean that our humanity and our caring has been diminished.
Yeah. But I think if you do feel hurt about it, to tell the person who's making you the joke and let them know that you don't really appreciate that. Because like you said before, we'll make that time right now that you can laugh at it, but some people aren't ready to do it right now. And so it's like, well, give me a little time. I need a little time to deal with this before you start laughing about it.
Yeah, we do. So on that note, that we need to give ourselves time to regain our own dignity before we can.
Right.
And then also, while at the same time regaining our own dignity, being willing to give it to others, regardless of what the foible or the error is.
Right.
Well, and sometimes I think that giving it time to bring back our own dignity is also that time that we need to be able to look at what was surrounding that incident and what was going on in our life and learning from it. And when we learn from something, that also feels good and you feel pleasure. So you're getting some power in understanding why this happened, or what you were doing or what you did wrong or whatever, at the same time that you're learning how to laugh at yourself. So,
well, we thank all of you for joining us today, and hopefully there was some
Enjoyment out of this.
of enjoyment, and thanks for being here.
thanks, Mona.
All right. Thanks, everybody.